Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 181 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's commentary, I'm going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 13 and 14. These two chapters specifically are speaking of Babylon. So Isaiah is giving a prophecy now for, really, he's kind of starts giving prophecies about the neighbors surrounding Judah or Israel, and at this point it's addressing the nation of Babylon. But I do need to say, as you read today's passage or consider the passage that you may have already read today, Babylon here is actually broken down into three different specific groups, if you will, or connections. There's Babylon the nation, which is spoken of in Isaiah's prophecy here. And then there is Babylon the city, which is spoken of. And then there is a spiritual Babylon. And in a sense, we're going to see the king of that spiritual Babylon is addressed in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. So, as we consider this portion, this is Isaiah's reference to really what will end up being the destruction of Babylon and how it will end up becoming a desolate place. Well, let's look at a few verses here. I want to first just say it starts out with saying the oracle concerning Babylon. Your version of Scripture may say the burden, because it is a strong message and it's a powerful message which Isaiah is delivering. Sometimes people can just glance over these passages and miss some of what's in store here. But as Isaiah was referencing this would have been, if you were to think today, a prophet, a pastor standing up and addressing, oh, this is what's going to befall Canada. This is what's going to befall Mexico. This is what's going to happen to, if he started addressing the neighboring nations, or even the nations which are seen as enemies to us today. That would have been the sense of what is taking place here. So, at that time period, the people would have eagerly wanted to know, well, what is going to happen? But as he's writing this, interesting enough, Babylon was not really seen as a world empire or a world power at this time. The Assyrians were the threat at this point. Babylon was not seen as a threat. So, all of a sudden, when Isaiah starts speaking of Babylon, this was of interest to some of the people, because they're like, wait, he's speaking of Babylon as if they are a pending threat. But then they're going to have a downfall. And they're thinking that their downfall sounds like it's going to be this great downfall that will be felt throughout time. If you think about it, we don't really even think of Assyria today. You hear of Babylon. Oftentimes the two are even confused. But Babylon still stands in people's mind, because it was a powerful nation. It ruled the world long before Rome ruled the world. And when we think of some of ancient kingdoms that were extremely powerful, we think of Egypt, we think of Babylon, we think of Greece, though their world domination was not near as long as the Roman domination. So when we consider each of those kingdoms, though, they rose to great power and they fell. But they did not follow God. They were following demons. They were not pursuing the Lord. So, as he begins addressing Babylon, I want to look at where he's going to address really the fall of Babylon. And this is in chapter 13, verse 17. Behold, I'm going to stir up the Medes against them, who will not value silver or take pleasure in gold. It's like they're not even coming after the treasure of Babylon. They just want really the name of that we destroyed a mighty empire. And their bows will mow down the young men, and they will not even have compassion on the fruit of the womb. So they're not even going to care for the children. Nor will their eye pity the children. In Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms, the glory of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It's interesting that Sodom and Gomorrah, we hear the name, we know the name. You can speak the name in many places, even places where people don't really know much of the Bible at all. But you mention Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're going to know of the destruction of the two cities. And you speak of Babylon, and people are going to know of Babylon. They don't always remember exactly how its destruction came about, but they remember the mighty kingdom of Babylon. The hanging gardens of Babylon are spoken of. We don't know just what they look like, but their beauty, their architecture was so impressive that even though we have no idea what it looked like, it still continues today as far as the impression that was put upon society. It says, it will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation, nor will the Arab pitch his tent there, nor will the shepherds make their flocks lie down there, but the desert creatures will lie down there. And their houses will be full of owls, ostriches will live there, the shaggy goats will frolic there, hyenas will howl in their fortified towers, and jackals with their luxurious palaces. Her fateful time also will soon come, and her days will not be prolonged. As I say, there's some double meanings here, and one of those being the destruction of Satan's kingdom. It will fall. Though today we don't see it as having fallen, it's already been defeated in that it's lost its fullness of power. And in the end, Satan will be thrown from his seat of power. Now, I know, and I've addressed this before, but I do want to just step back into it for those who may have missed this before. You know, we have this picture of King Saul. He is disobedient, and God says that he's taken the kingdom out of his hand. And the prophet Samuel is then led to the home of Jesse in Bethlehem. And each of Jesse's sons are brought before the prophet Samuel. They don't even really know what's happening. They just know that the prophet wants to see each of the sons. And when all of the sons have been brought before Samuel, Samuel says, is there not another? Because God had told him specifically that one of Jesse's sons would be anointed as the king to replace Saul. And Jesse says, well, there's my youngest son. Almost like he's nothing. He's out in the field. He's with the sheep. Samuel says, well, bring him. And this young shepherd boy, the least in Jesse's house, is brought in. The prophet Samuel, through the knowledge that God has given him, this is the one to be anointed king. And I say all this to say, Samuel anoints David as the king. Nobody's really told what's happening from what we understand in Scripture. And now David is the anointed, and the Spirit has been taken off, not taken from out, because at the Old Testament times the Spirit of God was like a mantle, like a garment. Like in New Testament times, once the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, the Spirit was then indwelling man. That's the difference. And the Spirit, though, had left Saul, though he still sat on the throne. I say all this to say this is the picture of the devil still sits on the throne, though he has been defeated by Christ. And then where does his power come from, you would say? It comes from the fact that people will not yield to Christ. Anyone who does not yield their life to Christ then allows the devil to still sit on their individual throne. They are submitting to his rulership. So we had this idea that Babylon will fall, and this is speaking of a literal Babylon location and a spiritual Babylon, which is literal too, but I mean not one that you necessarily can touch or see with the eye, but a spiritual Babylon. Well, I wanted to just touch on chapter 14, verse 12. This is so much I could say here. Just for the sake of time, I don't want to spend too long. But it speaks of really of the pomp and grandeur, the majesty of Babylon and the king of Babylon. I'll pick up in verse 11 because it sort of paints that picture. Your pomp and the music of your harps have been brought down to Sheol, to hell. Your music has been brought down to hell. Now, I want you to think sometimes about the music that the world produces. Some of it even at times slips into the church. You need to really start checking the theology of the music that you listen to. People have become very careless in this time period which we live in, and I'm meaning people in the church have become careless, and there's a lot of corrupted music which has come within the bounds, but within the doors of the church. So guard that. But the music of the world, especially now we see it ever more, it is hideous. The words of the music, if you stop and really listen to them, the whole kind of mantra that the music brings forth, it has an evil tint to it. Just be careful. Be on guard. So many times I've had people that would tell me, oh, I have sleepless nights, or I have this issue, or I just sometimes feel like darkness is around me. That would be one of the questions that I ask is, well, what kind of music do you listen to? I don't sit here and tell people what they should or should not listen to, but you should check what you're listening to. You need to weigh that. And if you're having some spiritual issues in your life, consider what you're putting into your life. And you are what you eat. It is say from your head down to your feet. So, in a sense, you're going to, the content, what you're putting into your life, music-wise, movie-wise, even the books that you're reading, they're going to shape a part of your life. They're going to come out. And so be on guard for that. Don't just pick up anything. It says, continuing in 11, maggots are spread out as your bed beneath you, and worms are your covering. Now that's just filthy, isn't it? And again, it's giving us this picture of this is just utter darkness. This is just evil. And, really this is one of these verses we don't even think about, but it suddenly catches you off guard if you've not heard it before. And then verse 12. How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. So some of your translations may say Lucifer. This is New American Standard, and it says star of the morning. Some would say bright star or morning star. This is the Lucifer actually comes from Latin translation. So it's not really a name of Satan, but it's more of a title. I will also say that there are some theologians of the past, probably even some today, who try to make a distinction in saying that Satan and Lucifer are different. I'm not going to go down that road. I'm just going to tell you I see them both as the same because it is opposition to the Lord. And I see it as one and the same because they both have the same origin, having seen themselves better, higher than God, or equal to God, and having been cast out of heaven. think that sounds like the same person to me. But it says, you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of assembly and the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. I will make myself like the Most High. This is going back to the very beginning, the very sins which Satan tempted Adam and Eve with. And that was, you will be like gods. He's trying to set himself up to be equal, or to be on the same seat as the Most High. It says, nevertheless, you will be thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit. Those who see you will gaze at you, and they will ponder over you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook the kingdoms, who made the world like wilderness and overthrew its cities, who did not allow his prisoners to go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. But you have been cut out of your tomb, like a rejected branch, clothed with the slain, who are pierced with the sword, who go down with the stones of the pit, like the trampled corpse. This is not speaking of a man in that sense. We'll see really when we even get to Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 28 speaks of this same downfall. And it's this interesting thing because in Ezekiel, the king of Tyre is being addressed, and then Satan is being addressed at the same time. And it's because these kings, whether they were possessed of the devil or had demons in them or just were under such great influence by the devil, that it's almost like they're overlapping, and their ending of their leadership of their kingdom will be similar. And so it's giving us that picture. So there's some colorful descriptions which are taking place here. But it is speaking of the downfall of the devil and his kingdom. We need to spend more time on this for sure. We're going to hit a few more verses of scripture later that speaks of the downfall of the devil. But know that even though he sits on the throne powerless. The only power that he really has is the power that people give him. And they give him power and leadership or ownership of their life when they do not yield to Christ. You're got to serve somebody, as the old song says, and it's going to either be the devil or it's going to be Jesus. Well, brothers and sisters, I do hope that your day's going well. Until tomorrow, God bless.